Hello, I'm here in Falmouth with a great panel to talk about retirement security and making the best choices for saving so we can all have retirement security. I'm joined here with Pam Hess from the Defined Contribution Institutional Investors. She has spent her entire life researching what is the best way that individuals can save, and now in her new position, she's making sure that everybody has the benefit of the incredible research she has done. I'm also joined by David John, who is one of the 5 top people who've researched the best policies for retirement security. He works at AARP, so he's a blessing for our country and for AARP, and I'm so glad that you could join us today. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And finally, I'm with Andrew Eschtruth, who works at one of the best research institutions, Boston College, which is a college that is near and dear to my heart and to many members of my family. And I have to say, you're a wonderful researcher, but I also get to say, go Eagles. So, thank you, Andrew. I call him often to ask many questions, and he's always so very helpful, as is David and Pam. I thought we'd start off with a number of issues. There are, different ages have different questions about what they should do, what they should save, how should they save, and we'll try to address each of those questions tonight, and you're welcome to call in or text in whatever questions you are. But I thought we'd first start off with, when you're thinking about retiring, how much money should you think about, Pam? I mean, you're the great researcher on what should an individual do. We'll also talk about public policy, but just as a person, how does a person think about what they need to retire?
Well, it's not all that glamorous, right? I think it's not all that exciting, but it's such an important step. It's just foundationally, take a look at what you have, what you're dealing with. Do you have an emergency savings plan? Do you have some money set aside to help you meet those short-term gaps and emergencies? And then taking a look at budgeting, right? It's, again, not glamorous, but so important to understand your outflows and what sort of resources you need to cover those basics, food, gas, right? And those are all top of mind with inflation being so significant and really eroding some of that. And we'll talk about that a little more later on the inflation front. But it's really just doing your basic homework and making sure you have a plan. And if you don't, asking for some help. I think there's always a chance to sit down with a plan, or as you're getting closer to retirement, those decisions become much more important and much more complicated.
I think that's right. Would you add something to that, David?
Sure, because we talk about planning and we talk about budgeting and things like that, and frankly, people hate hearing that because it just sounds like I'm going to end up with bad news, and that's terrible. So the easiest thing to do here is first talk to your spouse or partner, because we assume that they're on the same page as us, and it helps to be sure of that. It avoids miscalculations and things. But the second thing is, as Pam mentioned, starting to get a handle on what you're spending. What do you need in retirement? And when I did that, the first thing I did, I had a little notebook in my pocket, and every time I spent money, I wrote it down day by day. And at the end of a month, I actually had a picture that was pretty painless of what did I need to meet my basic needs from that point on.
Oh, that sounds very, very smart. That's terrific. Do you have anything to add to this, Andrew?
Well, I think, first of all, David's more organized than I am because I could never get myself to do that, so kudos to him. One other thing I'd just add is that it seems it's very important to think about what your goals are beyond perhaps meeting your day-to-day expenses. Do you want to leave some sort of inheritance for your kids? Oftentimes that might be the house. Do you want to have any special trips or other things planned? How are you going to handle long-term care insurance down the road? We may have time to get into some of those earlier, but there's some bigger, broader questions. And make sure you're on the same page with your partner or your spouse.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one of the other big parts of retirement is the role of Social Security. Some people are afraid that we'll run out of Social Security. I've heard that we're going to have a 10% increase in our Social Security payments. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are asking, when should you take Social Security? I've also heard something called a Social Security bridge. So I was wondering, what do you think of all those things, David?
Oh gosh, let's see if I can remember them all. First of all, the first thing is that Social Security right now is the only part of retirement income where you can guarantee that you're inflation protected. This year's COLA is 8.7, I think, percent.
Cost of living adjustment, I would add.
Thank you, very important.
Pam, see, this is the deal. Pam works with real people, and so she understands that we have to use words that people understand. Thank you,
Exactly.
thank you, Pam. I love David, but he is often talking to other academics and very smart people, but thank you, Pam, for explaining what a COLA is.
Yes, that's actually incredibly useful. I appreciate that. It has nothing to do with soft drinks or
Right.
anything along that line.
That's right.
But what that does essentially is that if you had, using pretty much the current inflation rate, just so we understand what the COLA does, is that if on January 1st, 2022, you had the spending value of $1, this December 31st, that dollar would buy the equivalent of about 92, 93 cents because of what inflation has done in the past year. The cost of living increase for this year for Social Security resets us back to $1. So we're basically back to being able to buy the same things that we were before. And that's crucial for Social Security. Now, the way you get your biggest Social Security benefit is, if you can, delay taking it. Because you get a reduced benefit at age 62. You get what is hypothetically your full benefit at age 66 or 67, depending on when you were born. And you get your maximum benefit at age 70. And between age 66 and 67, your income goes up 8% for Social Security for every year that you delay. And that's significant. So if you can, delay taking Social Security until age 70. The closer you can get to age 70, the better it is. Now, the whole question of, is Social Security going bankrupt? The answer is no, and very decidedly.
Can we just underscore that? The answer is what?
The answer is no.
Pam?
No.
Thank you very much.
Exactly. I mean, Social Security has a trust fund. That trust fund runs out in roughly 13, 15 years or so. It kind of changes from year to year there. At that point, hypothetically, Social Security could pay somewhere between 75 cents and 80 cents on the dollar. But having worked on Capitol Hill for 13 years as part of my misgotten youth, there is no congressman that is going to allow that kind of a benefit cut, because they would be unemployed at the next election. So does Social Security need to be strengthened and that over the time? Yes. Does that mean that you're going to lose your benefits? No, it does not.
And just to underscore that, the last time that we came even close to that situation, Congress stepped up. They changed the laws, and that didn't happen.
Exactly.
And Cliff didn't come.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that's did you want to add something, Pam?
I was going to add that I think it's so interesting, this misconception of, and I remember arguing with my father when he was 62. He's like, I'm taking my benefits. I'm like, Dad, if just looking at some of the basic numbers, you can access that you're getting $1,000 a month. If you access that at 62, they're going to give you $700 a month for the rest of your life. If you can wait until you're 70, you're going to get $1,200 a month for the rest of your life. And it really helps, of course, as we look at longevity being a very big risk for many Americans, especially those that are married. If you can extend that and try to, you're really helping yourself and your spouse, because odds are pretty significant that one of you is going to live, at least one of you or both of you are going to have a long life. And that's where people can get into trouble, is when you live beyond your expectations or when your money runs out. Social Security plays a really big gap in filling that.
Absolutely. And that's where we get to the bridge.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, please, yeah, a good segue.
Well, I just, when you said that people live a long time, there's a study that shows that 80% of 40-year-olds with children are more worried about running out of money in Social Security than they are of death itself. So when they are asked a question by themselves, they know and they are afraid. But there's a very odd relationship sometimes about how long I'm going to live, and they answer the question differently when they're asked, how long am I going to live, or whether I'm going to die. So I think we've got to do a better job of saying, yeah, you're going to live, and take advantage of whatever is there that will help you, and help your spouse, help your partner, help those who love you.
I think that's absolutely right. No question about that. We find also that individuals, when the question is asked the wrong way, underestimate their lifespans by about 20%. And that's significant. I mean, that's like living an extra, 7, 8 years? Yeah. And that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Maybe we'll get to the Social Security bridge a little later on. Pam, you've been doing a lot of work on, what's the best retirement policy. A lot of people have questions. Actually, in anticipation of this evening, I went to a hairdresser, and she said, why are you getting your hair done? I said, I'm going to be on a show about retirement. And I asked her, do you have a retirement plan? And she said, no, which is usually the question that I get when I go to a hairdresser. I always ask. And she said, but I did open an account, and I'm only allowed to put $6,000 into the account, and now I want to become a nurse so that I can have a real retirement plan. So she has seen that, in her own life, she made love to do updos. I think she did a really good job with me.
That's great.
But she realized that in order to take care of her family, in order to take care of herself, she needed a job with benefits. So, can you describe the challenges that so many Americans who are half of all jobs, as we know, don't have benefits? What can they do?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, describe what the benefits are.
Yes, the employer-sponsored retirement plans are the foundation for many Americans, right?
Half Americans do get benefits, so that's the good news.
Absolutely. And we've done a great job about automating for more individuals, putting them on the path regardless if they do anything. And that's been a big success. And those within the retirement, the employer system can put aside $20,500 per year. And for catch-up contributions when you're over 50, you can add in another $6,500, and that's going to go up by $2,000 more in 2023. For individual IRAs or Roth IRAs, it is a smaller number. And of course, the difference between the traditional and the Roth would be before tax or after tax dollars, which gets into a whole nother kind of question about what do you expect your tax liability to be? And there's a benefit to doing before tax dollars and after tax dollars, depending on the situation. But those numbers are different. And we've seen many states taking action and actually implementing auto IRAs, auto Roth IRAs, to help the other half of workers who don't have access to something through their employer.
Yeah. And one thing that I find is that a lot of people will look at big numbers, $20,000, and they say, well, that's great, but I earn $40,000 or $60,000. There's no way in the world that I can save that much. It doesn't matter what you save. Any dollar you've put away is something that will benefit you going forward. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is that states are taking action. We have currently 14 states that have passed something, we call them Work and Save, and it basically means it is a very simple system that allows an individual to take money every time automatically out of their paycheck and move it to a retirement account. Now, the beauty of a Roth IRA is, Roth is named after a dead politician. I mean, that's something that we either name things after pieces in the tax code or politicians.
When you say politicians, I would like you to have a smile on your face.
I always have a smile on my face. Whether it's because of humor or something else is another question.
I just want to underscore, we believe that politics is an honorable profession. I would like a smile on your face.
Yes, and we do believe that, yes. But the state programs are designed to be very simple for the employer. You don't have to be an MBA, you don't have huge expenses or anything like that. And they're also simple for the saver. And again, you don't have to be an MBA or something like that. The beauty of these is that because it's in a Roth IRA, you've already paid the taxes on that. It grows tax-free. And when you reach retirement, you can pull that money out tax-free. But even better is that if you run into one of those inevitable financial bumps in the road, and they come at all ages, at all incomes and things like that, if you have to, you can pull money out of your retirement plan and use it to deal with an emergency. And we have research showing that for people that do that, that have and use emergency savings, their family balance sheet, in other words, their family financial future is much stronger. And that's essential. Now we've got 5 states in operation: California, Oregon, Illinois, Connecticut, and Maryland. And we have the others that are in the process. Now Massachusetts has a program for small nonprofits, and there is a very strong interest in expanding that so that it could cover also Massachusetts workers without a retirement plan at the moment. But it's a good start, and it helps more people to build a financial future that is going to help them in years to come.
Thank you, thank you. So it might be that the person who did my hair,
Yes.
I'm glad that she wants to be a nurse, but maybe her colleagues would have a chance to save more easily.
And we have examples. For instance, if you do something like look at the Illinois website or the Oregon website, you see people who run restaurants or who do beauty salons
Yes.
or things along that line who are now for the first time able to save and build their future.
And
Wow.
I would add on, I think building is that this having an emergency, having something to access in case of emergency is really foundational to building financial security, giving people confidence to plan for the future. And we see that those that have access to those dollars are more resilient to those. Of course they are, right? And they're also less likely to tap into and sap money from their retirement accounts. Right. In a negative way that,
Yes.
that leads to penalties and,
Right.
and negative influences in there.
I think that's such a good point, because sometimes people do take money from their retirement account, but they're less apt to do it if they have an emergency account. So I think that's a really important point.
And
that
with
you
a
made.
Roth, you
Yes.
bring it out. There's no penalties on the money you put in.
Yes, I think
so
that's a
you're
really
not
important-
then penalized
Yeah.
for needing to access those dollars.
That's right. And I think go ahead,
sorry,
Andrew,
I was
what
going to
were you
say,
saying?
I just wanted to add that it's really important that these plans, these workplace plans, that people have the ability to do this in the workplace. Because unlike your hairdresser, a lot of people on their own, they won't save at all.
Right.
It almost never happens that people
Yeah.
go down to a bank and open an individual retirement account. They don't, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind to some
Right.
degree, and they've got a lot of pressing bills. But if you get them into an employer environment where someone's automatically taking a little bit out of their paycheck, biweekly, monthly, it adds up, and they pretty much go along with it. I mean, they have the freedom to opt out of these plans and any
Right.
kind of auto enrollment plan. But 2/3 of people roughly in these auto IRAs, and the numbers are even higher, I think, in the private sector, closer to 80 or 90%, they stay in. They stay with these plans. So they're kind of voting that this is something they can actually do. They're not taking themselves out once they're given the opportunity. You just have to make it really easy.
Yes, you
wanna-
do. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Do you want to mention what automatic enrollment actually is?
That's a good point. So usually when, in the old days, but sometimes still, if you went to an employer who offered a 401k plan, they said, okay, we're going to give you your briefing, your new worker briefing, your orientation. We'll give you a bunch of paper. We'll talk about a bunch of things, health insurance, and your ears prick up. I better sign up for that. I'm going to go to the doctor in a few weeks. And then they say, and if you go to HR, if you fill out this form, carry it down the hall, or go there, or email this to that, or scan this and send it in, then they'll enter you into the retirement account. And people think, oh, sure, I should do that. That's probably a good idea. But that inertia is very powerful barrier to people participating. And at some point, about 20 years ago, companies started experimenting, and the research really backed this up, the early research studies, that if you just automatically enrolled people into the account, they don't have to go to HR, they don't have to sign and scan anything, they'd automatically be in the plan, and they could still decide to get out of the plan or to change their contribution rate, but you'd get them started. And that kind of revolutionized a lot of things, I think, in the last 20 years in retirement saving in the private sector.
Including with investments, right? With target date funds, this whole concept of making it simple, automatic. So it's great to see it on the auto IRA side with the states taking that step, because it has been very effective in creating wealth and helping to generate real savings, even if it incrementally seems small. It certainly the benefits over time are substantial.
And what the states are doing is setting the program up and hiring private sector people to actually manage it and run it. But it's all very open and above board. And the key factor is that in an IRA and a 401k and all the various things, that's your money. Nobody can touch that. Nobody can take it. It's yours.
Yeah. Oh, it's very, very exciting. Let's see. We're getting a question right now. But while he's typing out this question, why don't you wrote a very wonderful article about annuities. And I'm going to use two words for annuities. One, annuities, and the second word is lifetime income or retirement income, because I think a lot of people don't really know what the word annuity means. And so what we're talking about is that the idea is after you retire, you would get a check every 2 weeks or every month that would cover you for as long as you live.
Yeah, no, that's a really good topic. And the reason that this is important is that your parents' generation, your grandparents' generation, if they were fortunate enough to have pension coverage, they probably got a traditional pension, which is different from a 401k, particularly in many ways, but on the distribution side, when you retire, and I come from Michigan, a lot of auto workers in our state and in the region where I come from, and they would automatically get a check in the mail. They get their Social Security check in the mail, and they'd get their pension check in the mail from GM or Ford, and that was their retirement plan. So they had this kind of lifelong income from Social Security, and on top of that, they had their lifelong income from their employer plan. In today's 401k world, it's different. The money is yours, but that means it's also your responsibility to determine how to make that money last when you're retired. And one way to do that is to take some of that money, go to an insurance company, and add a little bit of lifetime income in the form of an annuity. Annuity is simply a periodic check that's paid to you in exchange for a sum of money up front. You can have annuities that come to you immediately, or you can wait 20 years and have them start later on.
Well, I remember the paper that I read, and we just was at a conference when you had one of your colleagues that said most people should get an annuity because it does give you a peace of mind. And many people don't, when they get some money, they don't really know what's the best way to manage that money, and an annuity very much helps you with that issue. We can talk about that later, perhaps, but I do have another question. David from Boston asked, is there any circumstance in which filing for Social Security earlier is better than later?
Yeah, sure. If your health is bad, if you can't work longer, if basically you had an awful visit to the doctor or something along that line, yes, because you do want to, if you can, file for that in order to keep a protection for your family. But for most other purposes, the delaying is better if you can do it.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I think that's right. Another question I've got is, should I buy Treasury bonds now? I mean, so I think the question people are interested when we have inflation, what is the best kinds of investment? I don't know if we want to get into a lot of detail on this, and I do want to say to all those who are watching, we are not giving investment advice. We are giving general advice. So just to tell you that, giving you that warning that all of us are up here to give you general advice, so I don't know if you want to answer that question or not.
Well, I will be interested in my colleagues' responses here and anybody else on the panel, but I would start off by saying a couple words about inflation, because that is really important concern that people have right now. One thing which David mentioned earlier was the importance of the inflation protection within Social Security. And that's usually the primary foundation piece on which you construct the rest of your retirement income. So you have that sort of solid inflation protected source of income. The question is, how do you protect the rest of your income from inflation? And that's a little trickier. There are some cases in which you can buy annuities that are inflation adjusted, but there aren't as many of those offered as some of the kind that don't adjust for inflation. There is a treasury bond product called an inflation bond, which essentially provides inflation adjusted protection when you invest in that bond. So those are the options that I'm aware of, but I'm sure someone else can say something here.
I think, but I would always pause for folks to just think holistically. And it's hard not to look and react. I get it. It's painful to see the markets going down and your savings taking a big hit. But I think it's a little different for folks that are getting closer to retirement. If you've got a little ways to go, I would just caution folks to keep their eye on the future and remember that stocks do, over the long term, also provide a very good hedge against inflation, coupled with Social Security. It doesn't require a wholesale change to your investment strategy.
And I think that's actually a key point, because at a time like this, when the stock market's going up and down and we see inflation going up and alarming headlines, if your email inbox is like mine, you're getting all kinds of offers for, I know how to deal with inflation. And only too often your brother-in-law or your next door neighbor or something like that has some brilliant idea. There are a lot of fraud operators out there right now. And if something sounds even remotely too good to be true, it almost certainly is. And yes, it will benefit someone, but it won't benefit you. And the other mistake is going in the opposite direction, because Pam just mentioned this, that you see your value's gone down, you say, oh my gosh, the world is going to end. So you move into something that's less risky, and you've locked in your losses.
Yes.
And from that point on, because it's going to be earning less, it's much harder to build back up as you go forward.
I'm just not opening my statement balance the last few months. I'm like, just not looking. I know it's painful, but just keeping that long-term focus and not reacting emotionally, which is so hard to do when it comes to anything financial.
Well, I was, the other day I was with somebody, and she described how she tried to talk to her parents about finances, and her parents didn't want to talk to her at all. But she said, but they were happy to talk to anybody who called on the phone. So she decided that was not a safe thing to do. So she put her parents on a do not call list. Excellent. And I thought that was a very nice, very smart idea. And she said, sometimes those people on the do not call list do get through, but at least she tried to prevent it. And I think that's a very important and smart thing for her to have done, because we have in the United States, as you may know, we have 5 times the amount of elderly fraud as they do in Europe. And we really should make sure that our parents, who are often home alone or not paying attention to who calls, not only ourselves, are really protected, do whatever we can to protect them from picking up that phone and saying yes. So
well, and they're trained to get you to say yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, they've gone through all the objections and things like this. And I don't want to push my own organization, but AARP...
You should push your own organization.
Well, in that case, I will. But AARP.org
just needed an invitation.
has a large amount of material on financial fraud and how to recognize it and what to do about it and how to avoid it and things like that. And whether in this case you're the parent or the child or something, it can give you some information that will help a great deal to avoid unfortunate incidents.
Thank you.
Yes.
Definitely.
Very good advice.
Here, I have yet another question. I'm newly retired and I don't have much savings, but I have paid off my mortgage. Can I use my home equity to get income in retirement?
You definitely can. It's a good option to consider. We think, my colleagues and I at the Center for Retirement Research, we think that too often people overlook it in their portfolio, where it's often for a middle income household or middle wealth household, it's often the biggest asset that they have. So there's a tendency to say, you know, let's set that aside if we need it for an emergency, or if the kids, you know, inherit it, that would be great. But you might not have that luxury based on how much you've saved. So it's definitely worth considering. There are a couple traditional ways to do it. One is obviously to downsize, which means moving to a cheaper house, not just a smaller house that's just as expensive. So I think sometimes people get confused. They're like, one's smaller, so it's going to be cheaper at the same time. But move to a house that better meets your needs now. That will unlock some home equity
Although
when you
this
make the
is a tough
sale.
time to do it because the mortgage rates are so high.
You're right. Yeah, you have to time this right sometimes.
This is
but
probably not the best time for that.
another option is traditionally people have looked toward reverse mortgages, which is the opposite of a regular mortgage. You get the money now you're able to take money now in the form of a loan. You pay it back when you sell your house or pass away, and your estate will settle it up. Now, there's an easier way to do this same type of thing that can happen with a reverse mortgage. A lot of states like Massachusetts have property tax deferral programs. These are very simple. All you're telling people to do is don't pay your property taxes if you qualify. So if you're a homeowner 65 and over and you meet certain income qualifications, you can not pay your property taxes. So the state will make a little note, the town you live in will make a little note, okay? And at the end, same thing, eventually you have to settle up when you sell the house or you pass away. But it's a much simpler kind of program, easier to sign up for, no banks and financial institutions involved. So we're hoping that those are something that get more recognition over time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm about to retire, but inflation is so high. I have some savings, but I'm worried that I won't be able to afford even the basics once I stop working. What happens to that person? They don't seem like they're even in the middle class. They seem like they're in an even tougher situation.
I mean, I think this is back, though, to what David started off with on Social Security, is that person, that person's probably getting the vast majority of their income from Social Security if they're just trying to get by. And in that case, they are actually going to have inflation protection. It works a little bit with a lag, so it's not, but over the course of a cycle of inflation, they essentially will be held whole and they'll be able to meet those basic needs from their Social Security.
And this is the case also with budgeting, so you know what you're spending. And all too often when I talk to people who are retired or about to retire, they start to worry about, oh my God, I don't know. It's a worst case. I'm panic stricken. And if I put numbers on it, then I'm just going to feel even worse. But the fact is, especially in this kind of a situation, you can see that Social Security covers this much of what you need. And how you deal with the rest of it may be by cutting back. It may be by going back to work. I mean, a lot of people go back to work, and a recent poll that we did showed about 55% of those did so because of finances. But there are a lot of ways of doing it, but this is the case also where you talk to people, you talk to family, you talk to nonprofit organizations or things like that, because they can give you some guidance as to what you need to do at that point.
And it feels like having a plan just gives you confidence.
Yeah.
If you have a plan and you have your arms around the challenge, it empowers you to feel like you have options and you're not stuck.
I think I'm really glad that you say that, because I think retirement scares many Americans, and we don't want to think about it, and therefore we don't develop a plan. I think one of my favorite stories that somebody who ran a large corporation told me about. Some people were supposed to come in and talk to them about all their financial issues, and they came in, and for an hour, they talked about parking. For 55 minutes they talked about parking, and for 5 minutes they talked about retirement. So
Yeah.
it's that retirement is scary because they don't know finance. They're embarrassed that they don't know finance. They think, and people keep saying you need financial education, so they feel embarrassed and guilty. And then it reminds them that it's towards the end of their life, and that's scary and sad and difficult. So parking seems like a much easier question to deal with.
Yeah.
So I think that part of our challenge is to make it easier to talk about retirement and say you can solve it. And when I've looked into some of the statistics, is that if you find somebody you can talk to, you really can save a lot more, and you can and it will be much easier. Even if you don't have a lot of money to start off with, it can help you at any part.
Absolutely.
So.
And one of the problems, of course, is that when you talk to financial people, so often they're talking in jargon.
Excuse me?
They're talking about jargon. It's financial terms.
Yes.
And finding a way to translate that into English helps a great deal.
Here we have a question from Allison from California. Hi, Allison. She asks, if I want to continue working after I start collecting Social Security, is there an amount I cannot exceed before losing some of my Social Security?
It depends on her age.
Yes.
And
Okay, depends on your age, apparently.
yes, it does, because if you start taking Social Security before your full retirement age, 66 or 67, depending on when you're born, there is a maximum amount that you can earn before they start reducing your Social Security benefits while you're in that period of time. If you are working after that, that doesn't apply. So if your retirement age is 67 and you're earning however much at age 68 or so, that doesn't affect your benefits. That just increases your benefits and increases your income.
And I just want to point out that a lot of times that is, David's absolutely right. I just wanted to point out that a lot of times that's construed by people as some sort of tax or penalty.
Yes.
That the money just disappears. Someone came in and took part of their Social Security benefit away. But in reality, what Social Security does is they adjust your benefit check so that once you do hit the full retirement age, that money that they took back temporarily comes back to you.
Good point.
So over time, you're not actually losing any money. And a lot of people see that as some sort of tax, but taxes don't get paid back to you, so it's not a tax.
Thank you. Well, that was very helpful. Pam, do you want to talk about the value of a financial advisor and how you find a financial advisor? Or
Yes, it's. I always think of, like, for younger folks, it's a little easier, right? It's a little more one size fits all. Your problems are a little more manageable and simple. As you're getting closer to retirement, it does get more complicated and it becomes more personal, and our differences are more varied. And that's where sitting down with someone can be a really good start. There's fee-for-service planners. There's also going to your employer's website. Employers are more and more adding financial wellness tools, ways that individuals can get help and support, be it with one-on-one counseling, different workshops, or connections through like a managed accounts program or an advice program at work. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of options, and I'd say as you're working through finding an advisor, is to trust your gut and to look for a connection where they understand and are ready and able to help meet your individual needs.
And I think that's crucial, because you don't have to take the advice from the first person that you went to. I mean, it's kind of like your family doctor or a therapist or something like that. You want one who understands you and is working. The key question, ask the advisor, are you acting in a fiduciary capacity, which is a
Yes.
strange word, but what that means is, are you working for me with my interest rather than some company or something like that?
And I always think for women, we tend to be a little too agreeable sometimes, and I think it's okay to ask questions and be tough. And if you don't get the answers you like, then find a different answer.
I've also talked to a number of people who've said, among certain communities, and maybe larger communities, they don't trust financial advisors. And therefore, it's very important to find an advisor who has had a similar life experience as you have and looks more like you do. And so that's an important part of finding a financial advisor who you can trust. Because, anyway, I think that's an important effort on the part of people who are successful in finding a financial advisor. It's not just anybody, even though they may be really smart about the market. You have the rapport between the financial advisors are very, very important, and trust is very important. Actually, I was speaking to somebody from BlackRock, which is a large financial firm, and he said that what he discovered as he traveled around the world on retirement issues, that the single most important thing he's learned is that is the need for trust, and what has to be built on all sorts of levels is trust. So.
Absolutely, and I think that's why David's point about, is the advisor working for you, or are they really trying to sell some sort of products where they get a specific commission for upselling you, is really important, because that should help undergird that sense of trust.
Yes, understanding their motivations and how they're being compensated.
Yes, that's very good. We're going to move on to younger workers next, but I love this final question for more senior among us, although I think young people also like this. Should I invest in cryptocurrency, Pam?
Oh my goodness. This is where I'm ringing in my ears the younger millennials that I work with, and it's interesting. I have a 24-year-old nephew who is a millennial, and he's been investing for years. And I think crypto is a single investment, and there is this perception of hitting it big, of I just need to find the right investment, and it's going to, then I can live, I can live well, I can stop working, I can have this great life. When that's not what investing is. Investing is incremental. If there was one answer to investing, we'd all be sitting on a beach somewhere having a good time. We wouldn't be sitting here. It really is about being diversified and incremental steps. I think that this the advent of TikTok and it being downloaded billions of times now, right? And finance being a big part of it. It's amazing to me how I think there's some really healthy things, it's just basics, talking about financial steps that young people should take. But there's also this undercurrent of, but this is you got to buy this stock. And I think that especially for the younger generations, maybe there's risk to that single investment. I do love that it's engaging folks, though. I think it's really amazing that apps like Robinhood have gotten these younger generations of actually taking those steps in a simple and fun way to begin investing.
Yeah, but
yes.
but if you have money to lose, crypto's a great way to do it.
There you go.
You're in, et cetera. There's an amazing amount of fraud. The response has been like this in many cases. As far as your retirement investment, something you're going to depend on, the answer is not just no, it's hell no. Stay out of it.
Thank you, David.
Good point.
That was much more clear.
No, it's so true. You can have your retirement money, then you can have your fund money that you want to invest for your vacation, and then you can have your gambling money.
That's right.
And you might just think about 3 pots, and maybe crypto is your gambling money. I would, some of us don't want to do that at all, but some of us do. I'm going to leave it at that. I like David's response, moving right along. How about this question? We're going to move on now. I thought it would be important, as I said at the beginning, the investments often change depending on what age you are. Are you right before retirement? Are you at retirement? Or are you just starting your career? So we're going to move. These questions are more for younger workers. Richard from Maryland. I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say, Richard from Maryland. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to ask this question. I just got my first job, and I don't make that much. Should I sign up for the 401k my employer offers? I don't know if I can afford to save anything right now.
I'm sure Pam can elaborate on anything that I say here, but we always encourage people to sign up for that 401k. One reason is that there's almost always an employer match involved. That means you put in a little bit of money, you put in, say, 1%, and your employer puts in 0.5% for every percent you put in, up to a ceiling. So you're going to leave money on the table. You're actually going to just not get that money ever if you don't participate in the 401k plan. So if there was no other reason other than you want to get paid a little bit more, I would sign up for the 401k plan. That's my starting point on that question.
Couldn't agree more.
Great. Free money. I mean, truly. I mean, it literally is. And it's starting at a young age. It's the power of compounding. I mean, those dollars when you're young just are so substantially contributive to your future retirement, which is so different than doing so as you're getting near retirement. They just mean less and less. So starting and even a little bit can make a big difference.
Yeah, because the way you win in retirement is interest on interest on interest. Mm-hmm. So the longer you have the investment, the bigger it's going to grow. Plus the fact that if you're young and you run into financial problems and emergencies, you've got something that you can fall back on if you absolutely have to.
Yep.
So.
Well, here is a question that I don't understand, so I'm glad that each of you around the table will be able to explain it. This is Richard from Maryland, so I have a special place in my heart for you, Richard. Can you explain cost averaging when considering which investment funds should be transferred or liquidated in my 401k?
I would say when you think about cost averaging, it's your generally, well, your 401k, you're paying taxes eventually on your income. So you don't have to worry about that as much as you would in an individual account. But I would think of cost averaging as the dollars are going in, right? When the markets are falling, you're buying shares at a cheaper value. So you don't want to stop contributing, you want to keep contributing.
Yeah, I mean, the classic definition of dollar cost averaging, which is another one of those awful terms.
It is.
Okay,
yes.
well, since I didn't understand it, I would like you to explain it to me, please, very much.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much. I mean,
All right, the idea is that you're investing for the long run.
yes.
And if when the market is going up, a stock costs $10 and you're putting in $100 a month, you can get 10 shares. When it goes down, if it goes down to $5 a month, then you get 20 shares. Now what this means is that when it goes back up to $10 a share, you've got twice as much profit there. Mm-hmm. So over time, you're actually doing much better. It's a tactic that gives you a larger retirement amount and a larger retirement income, despite the awful name of the tactic.
And you're not dependent on a point in time of making some big decision when something's very high or very low. And that's one of the benefits of putting money in slowly over time and consistently, that you are averaging those investments regardless of the market cycles.
And what is he asking then? Should he take the money out now? He's asking, should I take, or liquidating it?
You know,
So that's our back to our portability, which we will get into in a bit.
We
Or
will.
should I liquidate it? And
You know, it sounds like he's managing his own 401k, which can be a good thing if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, it's a great way to make mistakes.
Yes.
And we will assume, because he comes from Maryland, that of course he knows what he's doing. So there we are.
Okay. Well, I would have said keep it, I would not liquidate anything right now, is my suggestion, because the stock market, as you would say, is lower than it normally would be. So I would keep it in that, in the 401k and wait till it bounces back to where it was. So that's my advice. Okay, but as you know, you shouldn't take any of our advice because that's not what we're here for. Okay, there we go. Okay, well, this is, I think that we've already asked, I worried about, this is my first job, I want to start saving in my 401k, but I'm worried about how to invest the money. The stock market is way down. Any advice? Any advice?
Target date funds. I think if you're new and they make it simple and they're going to manage that allocation for you. So a target date fund is where you invest your dollars towards your future retirement date. And that asset allocation is automatically changed for you over time. And it's diversified, simple, and one of the big changes in the retirement system in the past 20 years, and by far the most popular investment and a big help to many in the system.
Exactly. Pamela from Michigan asks. Oh, Pamela from Michigan has disappeared, Deborah. I don't know what happened. What is the role of financial education to solve any of these problems?
Wow. Financial education can be an incredibly useful thing, and especially at an early age, because we all make mistakes, and the older we get before we get that kind of knowledge, the more likely we're going to have bad habits that have developed. I was really lucky because I had an 8th grade teacher who was supposed to teach social studies, and he was bored, and he taught us the stock market instead.
No kidding.
Yes, he was wonderful, actually, and a lot of my future career is due to him, for positive or actually it's all positive, thank you. So we want people to know what to do, and that includes things like budgeting and using a checkbook or the whatever Venmo or however you're using money these days, and that's crucial, but it doesn't replace good products and good designs there. The best things that we've seen, as Pam has been mentioning, both the target date funds and automatic enrollment and things like that, is basically taking a complex process, making it easier, and to some extent do it for me. That's what we hire professionals to do. I mean, the most complex thing that I own is this. I have no idea how it works, and I don't need to know how it works. But when my younger daughter was 3 years old, she could pick one up and use it. And that's really the kind of thing we need to see in the financial world.
That's very good advice. I would just add that one role for financial education can come in tandem with this kind of automatic system where you educate people about why you did what you did. So if you have an automatic enrollment 401k that puts you in to a target date fund and you're in at 6% contribution of your salary, but that gradually goes up every year, which a lot of plans do, 7%, 8%, 9%. Why did they do that? And so because someone might look at that and say, I don't know if I should be doing that. Maybe I should stop. Maybe I should pull out of this plan. If you educate people about why you are guiding them in a certain direction, I think that's a very valuable thing to do. And a lot of times people will appreciate that, and that's a good time for them to understand the value of the education.
I think that's key. And one thing to remember in the case of an employer plan is that they are legally required to operate in your best interest and nothing else. Otherwise, they get to answer to some of your colleagues.
That's right. Well, I want to point out that the Department of Labor does have a number, and it was supposed to be put up on the phone, the back of us a number of times, that if you do have a question, if you need to find your retirement account, if you don't understand what's going on, you can call the Department of Labor, and we do have a way to try to answer your questions. We do want to be helpful to the people of our country in terms of helping you with your retirement. Pamela from Michigan has now reappeared on my screen. She says, my husband and I are the same age. My Social Security will be higher than his. When we get to the age of being able to collect Social Security, does it make sense for one of us to start collecting earlier and the other to wait longer?
Oof. This is a question where a financial advisor probably would be a good thing to have, especially in that case, because there are spousal benefits where an individual, usually the higher person, could get 150% of the benefit, et cetera. But once again is to consider how that fits within your overall financial picture, your family's picture. And that's something that you really do need the advice of a professional for.
Great.
Yeah. I just think as you're getting closer to retirement, it does. Things are more complicated. Your goals are different, and your situation will be, it's just less like the average as you get closer to retirement.
I would say they're not going to obviously tell you what to do, but the Social Security Administration itself can at least provide help in explaining to you what the situation is or what your alternatives are.
Great. I'm now going to switch to a different issue. The question of how we've talked about Social Security, we've talked about savings, whether you save at work or whether you save through what a state has done. But now we're going to like to talk about how you take your savings from job to job, which is something that you've been working on for quite a while.
Quite a bit, yes.
So this is one of the questions. I had a small amount of savings at my job, and they forced me to take my savings out. I didn't know where to put it, so I bought a new refrigerator. What should I have done?
Well, what you have done here is to buy a refrigerator, and you also are going to end up paying taxes on the amount that you took out of your retirement plan. So that refrigerator actually was a little bit more expensive than you thought. The better move, depending on the size, and here the law divides people into 3 different sizes here. If the amount you had was $1,000 or less, the employer has the right to basically give you a check. Now the problem is many HR professionals, because they don't want to deal with this could be complex or things, would be very happy to give you your check no matter what that size of your account is. If it's over $1,000, you're wiser to resist that and say, no thank you, I really don't want that money at this point. I want to keep it either in your plan or in an IRA. And if it's between, I think it's $5,000 or $1,000 and $5,000 at this point in time, they have the right to roll it into another asset, another plan, an IRA. But in that case, you really want to be careful to make sure that that IRA has the same kind of fees and the same kind of investments that you had in your plan. Because only too often they'll get rolled into a bank account, and basically it'll be the same amount for the rest of your life. There's virtually no growth. Now, the hardest thing, this is my personal experience here, is when I switched jobs about 9 years ago, I wanted to move my retirement savings from my former employer to my new employer. And I contacted the provider for my new employer, and they sent me an email that was that long and completely incomprehensible. It was written by the legal department, and it was basically designed to protect them from any sort of problem right now. What we desperately need as a reform in this country is an automatic movement, where when I move from employer A to employer B, my money follows me. I don't have to do anything.
And it's more important now than ever. The average tenure at employers is 5 years. So imagine if you're automatically enrolled, if your employer is putting you in a plan and then you switch jobs and you're doing it again and again, you could end up with several, either you're cashing out of the system, either it's coming to you in the form of a check and you're paying penalties and taxes, or you have a lot of little accounts.
Well, I've talked to so many 40-year-olds who tell me they have 4 retirement accounts sitting on their desk at home, and they don't want to consolidate them because, for instance, my son-in-law told me how when he changed jobs to job, it took him 15 hours. And if you can think about, you have children, you have your own job, and changing that is really difficult. I think we could applaud the Retirement Clearinghouse, who along with Fidelity, Vanguard, and Alight did join together last week to try to solve part of that problem. I'm very pleased that they're trying, but it is not going to be easy at all. And I want to say to the people listening, this is an issue that is nationwide. Oftentimes when something happens to you, you think you're alone. Right. And I can assure you, you are not alone. 92 billion is lost every year because people can't take their money from job to job.
Absolutely. And if you have many
and Boston College says 30% of your retirement is lost by the time you're 60.
Well, that's this issue of leakages, not just from taking money bleeding out of your account, but you accessing money or switching jobs and cashing out. So all of you, you guys just, I can't stress enough how important this problem is, and my agreement with everything that's been said about the ability to move money easily in this system. Ideally, you want your money all consolidated into one account. If you can do that, it's easier to keep track of. It's easier, frankly, on the asset allocation side, which what it means is that you could have, David alluded to this too, you could end up with like a little pot of money or several little pots of money that you don't even know what it's invested in anymore, or it might not even be gaining in value because of the way the employer was able to automatically invest it because they didn't want to have to think too hard about it either or have any responsibility for it. So it's a real problem. It can be overcome, and there are some, the auto portability movement you pointed out is very good for the small accounts, and there's some legislative fixes that people have talked about which could help. It's a big problem.
Well, thank you. I want to thank each of you for serving on this panel, and I especially want to thank those who've been listening all across the country. And I wanted to underscore that there is a lot of fear and shame associated with retirement. And I hope that we underscore today that the system can be changed. There are lots of really good people in the system, as you've heard. And there's lots of people who want to do much better. And they want to change the system to make it easier for you to start saving, to take your money from job to job, and to make sure that when you retire, you can retire in peace and security. So thank you for listening, and we'll continue to talk about ways the system can be improved and you can have a more peaceful life. Thank you.